So this is an overview or presentation of the early historical significance of Hastings town site. So where to start? Well, the place to start is pre-1860, prior to the European settlers arriving on the shores. The little bay, which we know as New Brighton, was previously known as Canada, and was used for many centuries by the First Nations peoples as a drop-off point. The trail, which you'll see noted in yellow going both ways to the southwest and to the east, was originally a trail to the productive hunting grounds that were around Deer Lake and Burrardview Lake, and it also extended further south to the Quanland settlements on the Fraser River, which would be down near Westminster. It was adopted by the European settlers after 1860 and still remains to this day as Douglas Road, which many of you I'm sure have traveled along through Burnaby. To the west of Boundary Road, unfortunately, that trail was obliterated through various developments, and there's really no trace of it in the Vancouver portion. So when I was putting this presentation together, I thought, well, what were the driving forces? What made this, first of all, created Hastings town site? What were the driving forces of Hastings town site? And it really came down to these points here. The early link between New Westminster and New Brighton, trains, and specifically the Canadian Pacific Railway. The fact that there was no government in place here as there were in other municipalities, as overseen by the province. And the land speculations we have in many parts of Vancouver, to varying degrees in certain areas, affected how development occurred. And as really you can say about almost any part of Vancouver, the boom and bust economy over a number of decades. And finally, the annexation with the city of Vancouver and how that brought about infrastructure and streetcars and other things. The Royal Engineers surveyed the town site in 1863, which predated the Granville, which is Gastown, Granville settlement, or town site, by 7 years. At the time of the survey, it was simply known as the Government Reserve. By 1869, it was named after Vice Admiral George Fowler Hastings. So some people might have thought it was named after Hastings Mill or Hastings Street, but no, Hastings town site came first. And George Fowler Hastings was famous for his travels around and into this part of the world. He sailed from England around the Horn to Esquimalt, and he paid a visit to Vancouver Harbour in 1867. So the next point being the connection from New Westminster to New Brighton. Probably many of you know that New Brighton was a resort destination, if you can believe it. It was an exotic destination for many people who were living in what was the primary settlement of New Westminster. And they came up Douglas Road, which of course was completed in 1865, to a hotel at what was called the end of the road. Now, the first hotel was set up by Oliver Hawking, and it was, and this is where it gets a bit confusing, is it was apparently known as the Brighton Hotel when it was set up in 1866, but later was known as the Hastings Hotel. And then we have another Brighton Hotel, which is in this picture here, which was built around 1880. The area was also important because of the daily stagecoach service that was put in place by 1867 that went back and forth to New Westminster, and ferry service that went across Burrardview to Moodyville. So then what was the vision for Hastings town site? Well, the Royal Engineers came in to survey again in 1869, following their survey in 1863. And that survey assigned 99-foot rights-of-way to streets from the waterfront and south, and extending all the way from waterfront to Cambridge Street. The other thing to note about when thinking about what is important about Hastings town site were what were the firsts, and as has been well documented, there were many firsts. Not only that it predated Gastown by 7 years, but there was the first bridge, hotel, wharf, post office, museum, and subdivision. And in this original survey by the Royal Engineers, there were things like church, hospital, government buildings. These were all envisioned, but never came to be. So the question then, it begs this question, this Grand City was visualized and it never happened. So again, what was it that caused it to not happen? Well, from 1870 to 1900, this was sort of the era when a number of decisions were made that really sealed the deal for Hastings town site. By 1870, it was no longer the end of the road. That trail that came up from New Westminster to New Brighton then was extended as a trail to Hastings Mill and to the Granville town site. There was logging to varying degrees throughout the area, and of course most of Vancouver through the 1870s and 1880s. And the town site was ignored as a lot of the industrial development took place in other areas. Why is this?
Electricity turned off.
You had an earlier message.